Hey, Liana. Hey, Gabriela. So good to have you on the Value Driven Marketing podcast. Thank you for accepting the invite. How are you doing?
Hi, Elena. Thank you for inviting us. We are fine. Looking forward to discuss new subjects with you today.
I'm also looking forward to talking about sales because my background is also in sales and I know it's always a juicy one. But before we dive into the nitty gritty, there's a softer question that I like to start with, and that is, what was your dream job as a child?
So I would be the first sharing that. Probably you'll laugh, but I wanted to be a president actually and to do politics, which at the beginning I started with that, and after that I just dropped it out.
That's quite interesting. Very ambitious little child you were. How about you,
Well,
Liana?
let's just say it's nice to be here, Elena. So let's just say I had a different. I still remember when you have, like the whole celebration with Santa, and Santa asks you what you want to be when you're a kid, when you grow up as a kid. And I remember saying that I wanted to be a movie director and producer. So that's funny because I actually married someone that studied film production. But then I ended up going into a more technical, college and degree. So I studied computer science, but I never ended up working into it. So I kind of fell into sales because I don't know, I feel like I like talking with people. So that's what I dreamed about.
So two very different paths, but led you to the same place of helping companies grow through sales. So let's talk a bit about SavoireFaire. So what services do you offer? Who do you help?
So our story actually began a while ago when we met in FinTech OS. We noticed at the beginning, let's say, a very stringent lack of sales resources and processes, and from what we saw in the market, we actually envisioned our project because at the end of the day, SavoireFaire is our sole project. We noticed that especially in the startup scale up environment. So we decided that will be our main focus to actually help startups, scale ups, and let's say medium sized companies to generate revenue.
Mhm.
That means that we came up with a new approach on the market, especially on the Romanian CE market, building a revenue strategy. And that's what we are doing actually around that, starting with pricing, with competitor analysis, helping on the international expansion, which is very important for most of the companies, and defining a sales process and finding the appropriate headcount to actually land on the sales process. We managed to do that successfully in all the setups that we managed to get in, and with the partners that we are working with, and we managed to do that by implementing a very let's say a new method of doing outbound and creating this outbound engine that works at the end of the day, where we can actually offer hands-on help in bringing the first results. Because at the very beginning, when you are starting a business, when you have a product but you don't have, let's say, a product market fit, or you don't have
Mhm.
data, it's very important to have a partner who is actually let's say concentrated on the execution, but it's very hands-on over there, aligned with your vision and mission. And that's what in big lines SavoireFaire and our project is doing, and in helping actually to scale and grow through the outbound methods.
Sounds very good, very on point. And I think it's interesting you mentioned revenue strategy because I feel a lot of people, when they talk about sales, they think of it as a quick solution. So I don't know, revenue is down, we're not growing as fast as we would like. Let's bring in another salesperson, or let's hire our first salesperson. Maybe we don't know our positioning very well, or we haven't defined our value proposition very well, but sales is going to, make things happen. It's very mathematical. You make this number of phone calls or send this number of emails. There's a low conversion rate, but at the end of the day, things are moving. So I'm just wondering, what's your take on that? Because I feel like this is not the whole story, right?
It's not the whole story, and it's very nice that you mentioned this with the revenue, because it's a lesson learned in different companies, but especially in FinTech OS where we met, and we were lucky, and I was lucky to have a chief revenue officer over there with a huge experience, and with a very good background on IPOs and different technology companies that scaled a lot with this revenue strategy. And I think especially on the Romanian market, we don't speak enough on this revenue stream, because we think that it's only about sales, it's only about inbound. We think that it's only around outbound, or a single channel or a multi-channel, but let's say that the vast majority of companies, they don't have the revenue strategy in mind when they are getting towards the market, even if we are speaking about the local market or the international market, but they don't have that in mind. And it's quite let's say frustrating in the very beginning, because our mission is also concentrated on the education part, because at the end of the day, yes, we can help through the things that we learn, experience, formalize, let's say, in different contexts of work or studies, but we have a mission to educate also the companies, and let's say the ecosystem in which we are working around this topic, around the revenue, around the sales, around the methodology, around the mathematics. Sales is not about charm. Revenue is not about luck. And I will just close with that, so that I am not hijacking the whole podcast about revenue, because I really love to speak about revenue, and our mission at the end of the day is starting with that, and the goal in the end to bring results is around that.
Good point. And because you mentioned bringing results, so I feel that, there's a lot of complaints, or just, it seems that sales and outbound sales doesn't work as well as it used to be. Of course, people are now remote, online. They don't necessarily want to be interrupted and so on. So it seems that all over the place, the conversion rate for outbound sales has decreased. So what do you think? Is outbound still a good channel to grow? In which conditions? What's your take on that?
Well, on this one, Elena, I think it's a good mention to start with the fact that there's a lot of noise in the market around outbound cold calling, prospecting. Anyone that follows this podcast, probably if they open up their LinkedIn right now, they're gonna see a post about using AI to do messaging, or I don't know, sequencing, and what's the best sequence, or what's the best cold prospecting email they can use, and so on. And the thing is, you mentioned that, yes, it's a numbers game. Indeed, everyone thinks it's a numbers game. You have to do an X amount of things to get an X amount of results. Sure. But the problem is, what numbers do you look at, actually? Because it is a numbers game, but you do need a bit of experience in going through these steps multiple times. And this is basically what we come with, usually, to know what to look for. Yes, there's a lot of use cases in which we've been where you can use technology against you. It could fall under spam. Your inbox gets totally banned. You don't ever reach your prospects or your desired ideal customer profile. Sales automation is great. Of course, we really preach that a lot. But the reality is, no, outbound isn't dead, but it's not one single recipe. So you need you need to make the perfect combination between a great process, uh, headcount. So you can't do this just on your own, that's for sure. And obviously, you need to use sales automation, intent data, and all the, let's say, the good things that technology brought to us that you also have to implement in your revenue stream. You need to go multi-channel, so it's not just, I'm sending emails or I'm only going to on LinkedIn, because we see this a lot. It's just spam LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best channel to get
Mm-hmm.
results. You're talking with people, so you never know what converts really. That's why you need multi-channel. And also, what we preach a lot is quality over quantity, always. But we're going to touch on that maybe later in this conversation. I don't want to again hijack this conversation, but no, outbound isn't it. You just need to know what to look for in your results and what numbers to look at.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And why do you think so many companies fail when they do outbound? So they're very eager to jump on doing sales, like we need results. Let's start a sales motion, or let's start our outbound outreach effort. Uh, and then 2 months later, nothing happens outside of a lot of sales automated sequences going out. Why do you think so many companies fail when it comes to outbound?
Well, I think an important subject will be that they're lacking a defined strategy, Elena.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And when I'm saying that, um, what's actually a defined strategy? Most of the companies, let's say, if we are discussing about startup scale up, they're positioning around the product. So they are not, let's say, looking very well to the market first and the need in the market. And I think also let's say it's a mentality difference between how the companies are starting in Europe versus how the companies are starting in, let's say, US. Because in US you are starting with the need in the market, and with the selling. They are doing actually, let's say, a selling, and after that they are building the product, which actually happens the other way around in Europe. So mostly they are very concentrating on this part of selling very quickly, and to
mm-hmm.
have a sales motion, but they are not defining a strategy around their goal. And usually their goal um, is about numbers. So being the first unicorn or the first unicorn or the best in class is not let's say, a goal that you can translate at the end of the day in
Mm-hmm.
numbers. They're not defining quite well the verticals where they will sell at the end of the day. And when I'm saying that, what does it mean, a vertical? It can be an industry, it can be a company size or a type of company, etc. They don't understand who is that ideal customer profile to whom you can refer, and you will have it in scope, and you map that ideal customer profile on the verticals, on the markets, and where the need is actually. And of course, on top of that, you need to come along with a process, so that you have a very well established, clear process where you can bring people that will execute at the end of the day that sales motion. And it's very hard actually to do that when you don't have enough data. Because
Mm-hmm.
if we are discussing about the well established companies, you have a lot of data. You can study, you can take decisions, you can take actions, you come up with a very good plan, and you have already the processes and the people. But when you are a startup, it's very hard because you don't have the data, and you have to define it, and you have to build it. You have to test them, you have to learn, and you have to apply very quickly what actually you learn from all the defined strategy that you put in place. And except that, I think there is a lack of method,
Mm-hmm.
because we tried a lot of things, but in the end, it's about execution and the method you are you are applying to that execution. As Liana said earlier, it's a numbers game. if you don't translate the revenue goal top down in an based on assessment to have, let's say, a number of activities, etc., on a daily basis, with the same drive towards the market, with the patience, it's not gonna work. And to actually answer to the to the last part of the question, if we have an example of companies, actually, there are most of the companies that we've supported are very good examples because we build outbound approach from scratch, having everything that I've said in mind. And I think this is important because you have a very clean and clear execution, and you can see results, and you can actually look at numbers after a while.
So start with a plan, have a way of implementing that plan. And can we talk about strategy? Because I think that's a very important part. When you mean strategy, what are the pillars of that strategy? So what should you set up? What's essentially the foundation of that strategy before you do anything else? Before you go out and hire people, you start selling, sending messages, and so on. So what's the strategy? What's the essence of the strategy?
As you mentioned, this is a foundation. This is your solid foundation when you are starting the business and you have the product. I like to call this like it's a, let's say, a executional strategy, because at the end of the day you cannot come up with a huge strategy around what you don't know, and you don't have the data, the numbers. You just have, let's say, very generic infos from the market, from your competition. And that's why it's very important to set up this foundation and this executional strategy around your business, looking towards the market, towards the competition, translating your mission vision into an actionable goal, getting to the moon and coming back and being an unicorn, or my product to be best in class, or there is no competition on the market. I have this let's say sexy product. Nobody has it. This is not a strategy. So you need to position yourself behind the product, and understanding that your mission vision, at the end of the day, they have to, let's say, conduct to this actionable goal towards the market, and building the revenue stream, so that you are moving way farther with the business. And I think it's not, let's say, a unique approach when it comes to this part of the strategy and how you are translating everything into an executional process, but the process by itself. So adding a process, a very clean and clear process, and after you define all this, actually attracting people on something that it's very clear, although it's, let's say, it's a tiny small business, a startup, makes the difference.
And you mentioned that startups especially won't have historical data to look at. How would you approach coming up with a strategy then, or how should the startup that really has very few data, how should they think about building their sales strategy lacking that data? Is there what's your approach essentially?
Well, it's not a rocket science approach, and we don't need, actually, at the end of the day, to reinvent the wheel. So we have enough examples, let's say, in the market. We have competitors in the market. We can actually look at those competitors from a technical, commercial perspective. We need to understand what lessons they learned, and we have to learn from their lessons. So we have enough information, let's say, in the first phase, as a early stage startup, or a startup or a scale up, from the market. If we listen the market and if we are paying attention to the market, we have enough information to actually build our pitch deck in which we can actually study some data from our competitors. They already done that. They took the way, so we can grab those informations, and based on that we can build an aligning our solution, our product towards the competition and the market. We can actually listen to the market. What's the need in Romania? What's the need in Poland? What's the need in France right now? And based on that, we are aligning the product on those markets. What's the pricing of our competitors? We can align the pricing from a commercial perspective. I don't think that there is an expert. Then there is an expert in this world of SaaS or technology that comes with the right pricing. No, we are looking from a technical commercial perspective to our competitors, and we are aligning, let's say, our approach based on that, because you are not a single player in the market. Innovation is not a buzzword right now in the market. So we are just coming towards the market, towards our prospect, towards our future clients, understanding their need and arranging everything around the business towards that. And I think this holistic approach in which you are listening to the market, you are going on a path that others were over there, it helps a lot with helps and compensate in the same time the lack of data. And when you don't have data, you have a goal. If your goal is to reach from 0 to 10K top down, based on some conversion rates which are pretty known in the market and they haven't changed that much lately, you are just multiplying those 10K, and you can see very clearly, based on your pricing, based on the verticals you are addressing, based on your ideal customer profile, how many activities you need to do so that you can reach the goal. And you can have in 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months a sales plan with data that you're building from scratch based on everything that, let's say, you envisioned, align with the market and everything that you are finding in the market right now, because the information is there.
So essentially, you're making some assumptions, you go to the market, then
Exactly.
after a few months, reassess using the data
Exactly.
you've gathered.
Yeah.
So take it
Yes.
step by step.
Mhm.
I also want to kind of take a step back and just ask the question, what does good sales outreach look to you? Sales outreach done right. How would you define it?
Um, I think there is a lot of noise in the market right now around inbound, outbound, cold outreach. How do you do that in a right way so that the conversion rates are perfect, so that you can have results fast? And fast, it's a buzzword right now for all the startup scale ups, because this, let's say, environment and ecosystem is growing, not only in our country but in the region and globally. You can't really control the way the market reacts. You can't really actually control the need in the market, or the timing, or if you are looking to your potential prospects or your potential customers, don't forget they are people at the end of the day. They are receiving a lot of commercial offers through all these channels that we are preaching, we are discussing for years and years. Especially right now after the pandemic, they are receiving much more of those. So I think what you actually can control from everything that you are doing from a cold outreach perspective is the process. And what we preach is that you need to use, let's say, the best data available. And that means that you need to choose very wisely your prospect based on your ICP, on your ideal customer profile, but not only. As I said, your prospects are human being. If you are looking wisely to the profile you are studying as your ideal customer profile, you will understand that you have to come up with a value driven proposal at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the cold outreach done right look like what we call this profiled prospecting. Um, there is a lot of noise around bulk messaging sequences, a lot of tools, chat GPT, AI, around how you can automate everything. There is a limited, let's say, number of companies that are on the market. There is a limited number of countries where you can prospect. So you can burn very quickly the territories
Mm-hmm.
where you are heading. That's why we use this profile prospecting, which at the base, at the foundation, comes with notions from the intelligence field, from open source information. And if you are doing this in a very, let's say, from a perspective in which you have always quality in mind, I think this is the good recipe, or the best recipe for the cold outreach done right.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned an offer that's value driven. I think that's super important because if you have a clear proposition and people see immediate value from what you're suggesting, what you're proposing, I think that's something that stands out for sure. And I think we can dedicate an entire episode just to how you can actually come up with an offer. And I see many companies just struggling to define that offer. What's the first engagement that they're going to give to their, to those people that they're reaching out to the prospects. So yeah, that's a very, very good point. And what would you say are some outdated tactics that companies still use when it comes to outbound?
Well, that's my favorite topic to talk about. Let's just say. No, but let's just say I'd like to start with obviously manual work. I went through it obviously for years of doing business development, sales, and so on and so on. I hate it, but at the same time, I know that you need it sometimes. So
Mhm.
you need to know where you put your manual work. And Gabby was actually referencing profile prospecting. Well, sending emails, doing touch points, you can do that automatically. You can use so many variables to make sure that the message is very custom. But where you need a human to actually still get into, and I don't at this day I don't think that technology is there yet, is to choose the data that you input into your sequencing
Mhm.
campaigns. Choose the people that you actually put in those sequencing campaigns, and actually uh, look at them as if they're real people, because that's very important. We always preach quality over quantity, so I prefer having a small batch of prospects that I've carefully chosen, rather than just doing a bulk search on LinkedIn or all the other obviously lead sourcing tools. So I prefer to actually have someone or go myself through the leads that I'm actually prospecting and treat them as people. And that obviously means manual work. That's what I mean by choose where you put your manual work and where you actually automate. Because
Mhm.
if we look at using tools, bulk isn't it's not a thing anymore. I know everyone has talked about this, but personalization, I don't think it's a thing also, because what personalization sometimes means is, oh, let me talk about, I don't know, ice fishing or the college that you went to and try to sell to you. But the reality is, what is most important is, are you relevant to the prospect? So is your value proposition relevant to that prospect? In my opinion, if you're talking to a prospect about a problem that really is burning to him, that's gold. And you don't need to tell him about what college he went to, because he already knows that you didn't go to the same college, so it doesn't really matter. So that's something we really preach. Relevance over personalization is really important.
Mhm.
At the same time, It's really important to shortcut the process. Everyone likes an experience. A buying experience is just as important as an onboarding experience in a product, in my opinion. So think about all the services that you're accessing. Also, like Amazon Prime, Netflix, they offer an experience. You also have to offer an experience to your prospect. And what I mean to that by that is, we find often that one of the bottlenecks that we encounter with the companies we work with. Okay, so the prospect replies, he wants to talk to us. What happens afterward? We will go into a ping pong of when can you talk? Oh, I
Mm.
can now. So I really recommend using tools like Chili Piper or Calendly. They're really important to shortcut that process, so you get the prospect into the meeting. Obviously, afterwards, DocuSign is really important. Having a smooth process in the whole buying journey is in my opinion, something that everyone has to do, and something that can really make a difference, because the reality is you can't really innovate for real. No one is reinventing the wheel. So what you can do is make sure that basically you're offering relevancy and a nice journey through that. And one thing that I like to mention is that do things as if you were the one buying. So if you wouldn't buy, would your prospect buy at the same time? So yeah, that's kind of our take on it.
And I loved what you mentioned about prospecting and rather focusing manual work there, because of course software cannot decide as well. And I guess some of the criteria that goes into choosing who you'll contact goes beyond just demographics. That person works in a, I don't know, specific role at a specific
It
company, but
does.
rather. hmm And could you go quickly through some of that criteria?
Well, for sure. You can, when you look at a person, just think of the fact how you're approaching that person. That's, in my opinion, very important. So, uh, if someone has a very, like, let's just say, anonymous LinkedIn profile, they're not very active on social, are they really going to reply a cold outreach on LinkedIn or even on email? And at the same time, be very careful where you send your emails, because technology can give a lot of fails. And the reality is, I'm not going to act as if it hasn't happened to me, or if it doesn't happen to large companies. A couple of days ago, I got an email with a title, "Hey, unknown." So you don't want that to happen. If you work with smaller batches that you carefully choose, and you look at the profile of the person, and that criteria includes how active they are on LinkedIn, how I don't know, how outspoken they are. You'll see that people post how many followers they have or how many connections they have. That's
Mm.
all information that is out in the open. And I think it's important to take into account. It's like Tinder, you look at people and you see what they have on their profile. If they have a lot, if they don't, and you take a decision based on that. And sometimes, even if the role is great, maybe the profile isn't that open to talking.
Yeah.
And then if I may just add a very, let's say, interesting terminology, because I know, especially for our market, is very, let's say, rocket science. But I've started this very early in my experience on my let's say business development path. Um, there are some things that are very, let's say, available in US, in Israel, and people are actually building from open source information and from the, let's say, from the social networks. They are gathering a lot of info, and they are actually establishing a buying persona pattern based
hmm
on everything that Liana said. And there are tools and there are methods in which you can bring actually cognitive science, neuroscience in designing very scientifically, let's say, your ideal, let's say, customer profile. I know that it may sound a little bit complex and complicated, but there is science in prospecting. Sales, outbound, it's not just only about numbers. It's around people, because at the end of the day, behind the photo and the LinkedIn profile, you have a, let's say, a behavioral pattern. You have
Mm-hmm.
a person. That person has some preferences. That person may be an introvert or an extrovert. He or she may be in the buying position or the right stakeholder, and it's not about being C-level or low manager or whatever analyst. It's a profile determined by a personality, by a human being. And I will just close um, the little parenthesis that I've made. So it's a lot about studying small batches. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of technology available right now. Comparing to the years I started prospecting, in which I was using Excel and a lot of manual work and etc. etc. But people haven't changed at the end of the day. They are still people. So let's not forget about that when we are just configuring our sales motion based on hundreds of prospects. It's very easy to be actually, let's say, defined and finished in 2 months or 3 months or 4 months.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering whether we can approach the topic of technology a bit later. Just kind of curious, what are some of the tools that you like and use? Um, and I'm also wondering in terms of whether there's a certain company size or rather company development stage where you're best positioned to make the most out of outbound sales.
Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
To be very honest, I do believe that you have to do it smart and
Mhm.
based on your business. And I think outbound is just the pretext in which and with which you are going towards the market after you have a strategy, an execution, and the revenue plan. And it's one of the ways you actually stay connected with the market. It's not just a vehicle or let's say an engine. It's a way, let's say, if you are using well this way, you can gather a lot of data and you can gather a lot of feedback, and many times it offers more than just revenue. It offers you a great value because you can find out about trends in that specific market. You can actually improve or add features to your product based on what the prospects are telling you. You can find infos about the competition, and based
Mhm.
on those info, you can actually prevent churn, for example, in your company. Um, you have to stay connected with the market, and outbound, it's a very honest way towards that, because you are doing the step towards the market, not the market towards you. So those
Mhm.
infos are very precious, and you have to take it into a very, let's say, analytical funnel for the whole perspective of the company.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes total sense to me. So thank you for sharing that. And I know you both mentioned about resources in the beginning and uh, defining the right resources so you're able to reach your goal. And I'm wondering if we can detail a bit more about that. So, how should the company think about the resources they need to allocate to outbound sales in terms of people, budget, tools, and any other kind of resources?
Well, obviously, when we work with the companies you do work with, and a big majority of them are in these startups, uh, we don't recommend getting a lot of headcount or headcount maybe whatsoever until you have a proven method and you know what you're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be selling, because it does happen quite often that they don't have that many deals closed, and you really need to prove a method. You find that process,
Mm-hmm.
but the reality is we always end up basically either supporting existing resources, that does happen a lot also, or helping some of the founders, because we don't preach that all the founders have to be selling, but the ones that are fit for that, to basically set up a process method, and obviously prove the whole method and see it actually works in industries. The assumptions that you come up with, you test them, and you see if you need to improve them or if you have to change them altogether. The reality is, in my opinion, if we talk about the actual tools that we use and the cost of those tools, uh, they're not really that expensive. So I'd say for one headcount, one account, even if it's the founder, the average cost of the tech stack that we recommend is 100 euros per month, 100, 150 euros per month, depending on what where you want to get, or how many markets you're approaching at the same time, how many activities you need to do, and so on. But they're not that's not the hard part. So the cost is never is never a problem. That's not a reality. That's the reality of things, is actually knowing what to do with those tools, and obviously going through the motion over and over again, because it can be pretty repetitive. uh
Mm-hmm.
it's um it is a follow-up game. But we also, one of the things that we do, we have seen that in this side of the world, so Europe, there's a stringent need for sales, and generally revenue headcount, sales and marketing headcount. So one of the recipes that we've found successful in many use cases is, once you set up that method, you spend like 3-4 months on it, you prove it, you start seeing results and motion through the funnel. You onboard a more unexperienced junior resource, and you try to basically um, you know onboard them on the process. The reality is, I was listening to a podcast a few days ago, and basically people think that, sales, how sales will look like in a few years, it will be, we'll all be using tools, and you'll be kind of a manager of tools, so nothing more really. So that's why a lot of more junior resources are a good fit sometimes, especially if you're using sales automation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And do you think there's a right time and place to hire, let's say, your first full-time salesperson? Maybe you'll do some tests, maybe work with a company that specializes on just doing the outreach part. Do you think there's a right time to hire that first salesperson, that first full-time salesperson?
So it's not a secret recipe or a perfect recipe for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and well, I'm going to talk a bit about using, an outsourced company for your outreach for sure. But at the same time, we don't recommend outsourcing the whole process.
Okay.
You need to set up basically a foundation and a structure that works and proves some results. So once you have a proven method, in my opinion, that's the good timing to have a full-time headcount. You can use an outsourced company to do your outbound outreach, but obviously those leads have to go somewhere, and that's kind of the point where you need
Mm-hmm.
someone to take them and do something with those leads and actually close them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know I'm going a bit sideways, but because you mentioned whether you recommend or not outsourcing outbound sales, would you say there's a good structure in which, or rather, just to make the question broader, do you think that there's a way in which you can be successful working with a specialized company that does just outbound? Are you better off in housing, if I can say, the activity?
Well, I'd say there is a good setup in which you can do that for sure. We're gonna touch on that a bit later on and go broader
Okay.
into the subject. But what I want to say is why it doesn't work usually is
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have a proven method. ICP, your ICP isn't tested. It's like your product. You need product market fit. You need the market fit and the proven market fit also for your sales. So most of the times, the stories that we hear is you can buy leads, you can buy meetings. The problem is they don't convert. The companies that you hire, they're very good at what they do most of the time. They can get you that meeting. The problem is that it doesn't convert. So this is we have let's say our own spin-off on this, and how we, because we also will be doing this soon enough, how we help companies outsource their outbound and also make it successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's talk a bit about expectations. So, what are some realistic expectations when it comes to outbound sales in terms of results you can achieve, but also timing? Because I think timing is a big factor as well.
Well, it's very nice that you mention actually timing, because actually the need in the market and the timing you cannot fabricate. You can have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of budgets, you can have small budget budgets, or let's say external resources, or you can have let's say external salespeople working on the territories. But there are two things that you will never manage to fabricate: the timing and the need in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in my opinion, conversion rates haven't changed that much, Elena. Although people think that they tanked, reality is that they were never that high.
Mm.
I was working in the same area before the pandemic. After the pandemic, I was caught up in the pandemic in a huge SaaS company. So we were doing, and there was a lot of quantity over quality and vice versa always. Because there is a market always, there is a need, there is a timing. You need to be in those contexts to actually reach the momentum. And it's very easy to, let's say, reach those things when you have a clear mission. And I know that probably people will say, well, it's not easy. Well, it's easier than usual when you have a clear mission and a goal aligned with your processes and a method proved. You need just to fuel the engine and give it some time till you are jumping to the next iteration and you are pivoting again. Because I think that what we lack most lately is being patient.
Mm.
We're expecting that the results to happen yesterday, because we have a lot of technology. We have in a way shortcutted the process, but the reality is that you can find some bottlenecks in the sales cycle. You can hijack them a little bit, but you cannot fabricate the sales cycle. It's determined about everything that we said earlier: the timing, the need, the prospect, the buying mood, etc., the solution, etc.
Which is the
So
complexity of how
the
many solutions
complexity.
out.
Exactly, exactly. There is a market with a lot of solutions. There is a growing, let's say, fever of startups, scale-ups, in all the countries and regions, and um, there is still the human being in the loop who is buying that, who is looking to that. I would say that to have some realistic expectations, that between let's say 3 to 6 months is a minimum to be able to gather enough data and start seeing
Mhm.
pipeline move through the funnel. Because otherwise you will just test and iterate and pivot, and there is a lot of noise. I've heard that the other companies are doing that. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, if you don't have a clear mission and a goal aligned with everything that's happening in the market, the execution will beat you.
Mhm. So give it at least 3 to 6 months before you pivot,
Exactly.
before you test something else. Um, mhm.
You need to have relevant feedback from the market, and to have relevant feedback is actually gathering data. So you cannot gather data in 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I guess there are so many tactics and tools that the temptation to try something else when you're stuck is very high. Okay, and speaking of data, what are the KPIs that you typically look at?
So I'd say there's two things you need to look at. What happens before the lead is qualified? So that is top of the funnel. What happens after the lead gets qualified? So usually in the sequencing tools that we use, and those can either be usually we use Overloop or Apollo.io. I've tested quite a lot of them. I have a lot of free trials, let's just say, and in my opinion, they mainly do the same things. It's it's a question of preference most of the times. You're looking at click rates, reply rates, open rates, obviously also on A/B testing, and you want to A/B test on very specific variables. So you're basically A/B testing branches should not be very different because otherwise you're not really testing anything. You're kind of sending to very different things. So you also want to look at that. Keep in mind that we don't recommend using large batches of prospects of data, especially in the beginning. You're looking at having a small sending limit, like around 50 touches a day, and usually we work with 50 prospects at once at a batch. So that's kind of what we are looking at. At the same time, once you get a reply, you want to look basically the conversion rate from that point, because it's important to see when the meeting actually gets booked, how quickly it actually gets booked. That's why we recommend Chili Piper, Candy, and all those tools that help you basically move the prospect as quickly as possible and not lose his interest. And basically what is detrimental also, and what we recommend, because in my opinion that's very much in your control, is what happens with those leads that you get in the meeting. What happens to them? Make sure you qualify them as good as possible. This is also one of the topics that we go over. Having a very well established discovery process, having a very well established sales process altogether, and know exactly how to qualify those leads, because that really is in your control. You want to go into that meeting, from a buying perspective, from a selling perspective, let's just say, and positioning yourself as that. So I see a lot of people, especially more inexperienced people, be very hesitant to sell. Selling isn't unnatural at all. Just make sure you're relevant. So don't try to force anything on anyone. Be human. That's in my opinion very important. And at the same time, to make sure you don't lose leads through these cracks, what we recommend, especially at the beginning when you don't have a lot of leads, one of the first deal stages that we actually implement in HubSpot is actually lead. So basically, if someone confirmed the meeting, I want to have it in HubSpot. I want to know what happens to it and make sure it moves to either disqualified or qualified. So that it doesn't stand in a limbo. And I want to have it in the CRM just so I'm tracking everything I can and not losing any potential business.
That's a very good point about leads falling through the cracks. Just have they hanging there. They might express interest, but you just lose them. And
Well,
in
it's
terms of
the
yes,
follow
please.
up game. Sorry, Elena. The follow up game is, in my opinion, very hard to do, because
Mm-hmm.
you have to follow up with that prospect until. So if he said yes and you didn't get him into a meeting, just make sure you follow up, because there was some interest. And whenever you follow up, you have to actually offer some value. So not just
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm just bouncing up into the top of your inbox this email. Just remind him of the value proposition that you started with. So the follow up game is very important and not usually easy. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point about bringing back the value proposition. So it's not just I'm cluttering your inbox and I'm just here to annoy you. You said yes initially because there was something there for
Yeah,
you.
because think about it. Who's gonna scroll four emails down to see what you actually said initially? That's why I think it's important to remind him of why he said yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very good. And in terms of tools, I'm very curious to learn what are some of the uh, categories of tools and maybe even names of tools that you're using and that are helping you automate your work when it makes sense, of course, to automate it.
So, as I said, Apollo IO or Overloop, I like these are the ones I like. I've tried multiple, but we always keep in in consideration the budget. Apollo IO has very good leads and emails, and I like that a lot. So that's usually what we use for sequencing. Calendly, Chili Piper, either of the two are very good when it comes to scheduling meetings and so on. DocuSign, we insist on implementing that for contracts and contract signing and NDE signing and basically shortcutting the process as much as possible. And obviously HubSpot. So that's it. In my opinion, the tech stack doesn't have to be very complicated. We're looking to also implement some RPA so we can shortcut the manual work process even more. But what is really important for me when I'm helping my customers and when I'm implementing that, and for you also, if anyone decides to do this, is to keep it simple. So keep it stupid simple, just so you actually use those tools. Because we do see also some more technical founders. They love. I love tools also. I always sign up for a free trial, but the reality of things is don't clutter yourself with too many tools so that you don't end up using them. So that's what we use.
So process over tools, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And for me as a marketer, I'm very interested to know how can marketing best support sales. There's always a conversation of who does what, who writes the sales sequence, of course. And I'm just wondering, how can a marketer, whether it's a solo marketer or a marketing team, best support sales so that they reach the revenue goals?
Aligning, first of all. I think it's very important to understand that we all have a common goal, the revenue. The reality is that it's always a tango between the two functions, where each helps the other. I don't think the two departments functions, how do you want to call it, at the end of the day, they are split it, or they're doing their work in a singularity. Uh, there were many situations where we had to come up with a very high level, let's say, marketing plan or marketing requirements, because there was no marketing hire, or just to align everything that we were doing from an outbound perspective, so that we can actually bring the best results. The list, let's say, starts with the main topic for us when we are building this outbound approach, and the main topic is always a conversion driven website. If we are just looking to that, and if we are adding just a blog, some case studies, some relevant events, which at the end of the day will contemplate and will add the right flavor to the outbound engine and to the outbound approach, we will be able to build that revenue stream. I think it's very important to stay aligned, to work together, to dance in this tango, because there is a lot of work on both sides. There is a lot of experience. There are a lot of methods, flavors which you can add on top. But at the end of the day, being a team all together in driving the mission and the vision and the revenue goal of the company towards the market, it can be actually driven in just only one vehicle, not in splitted ways of doing that.
And I guess aligning means aligning on who's the ideal customer that we sell to, the markets, the verticals you're mentioning, how we
Exactly.
present the. Yeah, I think that's a very good
having
point.
the having all the right activities aligned with that, so that you don't have splitted directions. Let's say the marketing going on one side in one direction, the sales going on a different side. and the product elsewhere, let's say. So I think it's very important to stay aligned and to drive that vehicle towards the market together.
And in terms of a marketing function, you mentioned when there's no marketing hire, or maybe the team is very
Mhm.
small. You mentioned you would look at having a conversion-driven website. Is there anything else you need in place in order to be successful with the outbound sales?
Well, I think the conversion driven website is the most important, and we are starting with this recommendation in all the setups that we are working, because at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day, your prospects, your future customers will look at your solution, and your solution is available on your website. And that website has to be, at the end of the day, a functional, let's say, a functional vehicle which will pass the right, simple, clean message. Nothing complicated, just you have to have this right setup in which you are just conveying the clean and the clear message around what you are offering. Maybe a case study over there, a blog. It's enough to be relevant towards the market and towards your prospect, your future your future customer.
Okay, okay, that makes total sense. Liana and Gabriela, thank you so much for sharing all your insights. Just wondering where people can find you. What's the best way to reach you? Is it over LinkedIn? Is it another channel?
So we have two things. LinkedIn, obviously. We're pretty present there, and you'll find us always on LinkedIn and also our website. So it's SavoireFair with an e.com. So that's kind of the best way to reach us. And we'd love to talk to anyone who's looking to supercharge their outbound activities, let's say.
Thank you, Liana, and I'll make sure to also add the links in the episode description. So thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your ideas. It was lovely.
Thank you very much, Elena, for the invitation. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Nana. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.